Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show, and I am your host, Desiree Duffy. But first, before I introduce our magnificent guest today, Dr. Susan Landers, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I have in this cup. It is my teacup. Sometimes there's coffee in it, but right now I have novel teas in this cup. Check this out. Now, doesn't this look like a book? It looks like Peter Rabbit, doesn't it? That's a tin. It's a tea tin. Check this out. Inside is this beautiful tea. And the cool thing about novelties is they are inspired by literature. This one was inspired by Peter Rabbit. This one inspired by Peter Pan. Isn't that just lovely? I adore these. We have Pride and Peppermint. How funny is that? Anne of Green Tea Gables. I could just go on and on. I'm barely scratching the surface. You have to check it out. It's at novelteastin.com. Excuse me, one more time. Let me say that correctly. novelteatins.com. That's the website. They have all sorts of bookish tea tins and delightful things. Great. Christmas gifts or holiday gifts for somebody on your list who loves books and loves tea as well. And right now, I would like to introduce our guest today. You know, the joy of babies, the joy of having babies and of being a parent. That's what the theme of today's show is about. It's books that make you celebrate the joys of being a parent. And when you're a new parent, and especially if you're an expectant mother, you get babies on the brain. It's like baby brain. Suddenly you're getting the home ready for that new baby and you're shopping for clothes and bottles and high chairs and so much more. You just get wrapped up in the expectation of this new addition that's coming into your family. Well, today we're talking to somebody who is a neonatologist. I hope I said that right. And the author of the new book, So Many Babies, My Life Balancing Being a Busy Medical Career and Motherhood. Now, Dr. Susan Landers has spent over 35 years and is a mother of 3 children, of her own children. And she describes in this book how the full-time practice of neonatology influenced her experience as a mother. Many parents have tough choices to make if the baby is born premature. Sometimes moms suffer from postpartum depression and so much more. That happy time can easily sometimes turn into a stressful time. So we're going to talk about the happy stuff and maybe some of the stuff that's going to help us cope a little bit, and as well about being a mom, a busy mom, and writing this magnificent book. Dr. Susan Landers, hi, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Desiree. Thank you for the invitation.
My pleasure. And thank you for doing everything that you do as a mom, as an author, as a healthcare professional. You've got a lot going on, or had a lot going on. So let's talk about, that time when we're so happy and we have that baby brain and everything in the world is just revolving around the baby. What are some of the things that you'd like to tell expectant parents? What should they expect when they're expecting?
Well, there's a lot of information available out there about baby care and equipment that you need for the baby. New moms will interview pediatricians to decide who they're going to work with to care for their child. They have already bonded with their obstetrician, and they're thinking about nothing but having a baby. Mm-hmm. What I like to talk to moms about is breastfeeding support, because American moms have more trouble with breastfeeding than anticipated as a general rule. And I like to talk about the process of becoming a mother. Sometimes we get so excited in the pregnancy and the birth and all the planning that we do for the baby that we forget to acknowledge that we as women will go through a huge transition. And that transition is called matrescence or becoming a mother. And it's different from being a worker, it's different from being a wife, a sister, a cousin. And I think sometimes the process of becoming a mother catches some women off guard. Especially if they're working mothers, when time comes for maternity leave and at the end of maternity leave and they're ready to go back to work. Oh, I have this beautiful baby. I don't want to go back to work. I want to stay home and be a mom and take care of my baby. Or, well, okay, I've got this down. I do want to go back to work. That makes me feel so guilty. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I have to leave my baby with someone else. So, this whole process, whether you're a stay at home mom or a working mom, when you have your first child, your identity changes, and we all have to adapt and cope with that identity change. It's not just wiping little beautiful heinies and changing diapers and learning how to breastfeed and getting up at 3 a.m. It is this whole notion of another human being is totally dependent on me. And I'm a different wife now, and I'm a different person now.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing too, is we have this idea of what we think it's supposed to be. And then we have the feelings of what society is telling us or what we perceive society is telling us the way we're supposed to be. And then we have this reality, and that leads into, and you touched on it too, sometimes then we feel guilty because of the way that we're feeling, but actually that's natural.
Yes, it's very natural to feel guilty, especially if you like your work. If you found your work meaningful or fulfilling and you want to go back to work, well, that makes you feel guilty as a mom. I don't know. I shouldn't want to leave my baby with someone else. That other person won't do as good a job as me. And I think that
Mhm.
we naturally feel split in those ways. And some people have trouble with that. So I like for young women, young mothers to think about how their relationships are going to change after having a baby, because it seems like all they think about is infant care, breastfeeding, infant care. The husband gets put on the back burner for a while, and they're tired. And being tired and being sleep deprived brings out the worst in all of us.
Mhm.
No one does anything well when they're tired or sleepy. And so I try to prepare them for that process and let them ask questions. I try to encourage them to talk to other mothers who have been through it, friends that may be, a year ahead or a kid ahead of them to touch base with to see if how they're feeling is normal. And
Yeah,
and a lot of young mothers find comfort in that. One
absolutely.
thing that American families used to do when babies were born is go visit the mom and the baby. COVID did one good thing for new moms and babies. It kept visitors away. And I know that sounds really mean, but a new mom doesn't need a visitor. She didn't want to entertain a visitor. She needs to learn how to take care of her baby.
Mhm.
She's learning how to read her baby's cues. She's learning how to breastfeed. She and her husband are adjusting their relationship, and visitors always get in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes in laws do too. And then mom misses a nap, and then everything spirals kind of down. So I like to talk about the realities of being a new mom with respect to having visitors too, even though in COVID they didn't have to deal with that. That was good.
Yeah, that was one of the few fringe benefits of COVID,
Right,
wasn't it?
right.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you are uniquely qualified because of the fact that you spent 35 years working in the healthcare industry and you're a mom of three. So you really saw both sides of everything, didn't you?
I did. I was so fortunate. I love my career as a neonatologist. I got to take care of preemies, bigger babies, babies born with birth defects. I got to talk to parents at every stage of their child's illness. And I got to do that in the process of having my own kids and raising my own kids. So I felt like I brought a little bit of normalcy to the process. The
Mhm.
NICU moms would say, "Oh, you're a pediatrician. Your kids are probably perfect. You're doing everything perfectly." And I would go, "No way. Are you kidding? My house can be chaos sometimes. None of us do anything perfect. We're all human." And I would tell them stories about challenges that I had with my own children or breastfeeding or
Mm.
early child care. And it reassured them. It made them feel like they were going to be able to manage, like that we all shared this common bond of being mothers together.
Mhm. Now, you've mentioned breastfeeding a few times, and in the very beginning, you mentioned something that I'd love to dig into a little bit more. And, why is it that American women aren't responding and as informed about breastfeeding or as successful? What's going on there?
Well, I think they are informed, and in general, their success levels are increasing. More than
Mhm.
75% of new mothers start breastfeeding. Probably about 40% are still nursing their baby at 6 months of age. There's so many factors that go into success with breastfeeding. The biggest hurdle to overcome is going back to work,
Mhm.
pumping and maintaining a breast milk supply when you go back to work. Husband support has increased over the decades. Now, new moms generally have support of their husbands, but many lack the lactation support that they need if they develop a problem, mastitis or plugged ducts or a sick baby or a medication for mom. And so there are lots of myths out there still about things you can or cannot do when you're breastfeeding. Um, I, I I typically hear mothers say, "Oh, I'm taking an antibiotic for such and such. I can't breastfeed." And I go, "Yes, you can. We give
Hmm.
that antibiotic to newborns all the time. So that's not a reason not to breastfeed." So I think moms get waylaid along the way. Um, Essentially, going back to work is the number one hurdle they have to overcome. And so the caregiver who's taking care of the baby while mom's at work may be giving formula instead of express breast milk. And that tends to fill up the baby, and then the baby requires less breastfeeding, and mom makes less milk. And then we sort of begin the downturn of stopping breastfeeding. It varies a lot. It depends on mom's motivation. It depends on the amount of support mom gets for nursing, how much her pediatrician helps, whether there's a lactation consultant involved. There are lots of factors that produce success for American moms.
Yeah, yeah. And the baby matters too.
Oh, baby
Sometimes
matters a
the
big
baby
deal.
doesn't want to give up.
Woo, my first one was easy, easy to nurse, and my second one was like a shark. It was crazy. I never dreamed that it could hurt so much, and it turned out she had a tongue tie, and it took me. Here I was, a pediatrician,
Mhm.
neonatologist, and it
Yeah.
took me about 3 weeks to figure out what was going on. It was really difficult, and my pediatrician was not very helpful. So
Mm.
those kinds of things happen, and they're very discouraging when they do happen. So,
Yeah, yeah. Can we talk a little bit about postpartum depression?
oh, sure,
Yeah, yeah. I'd love
sure.
to.
Postpartum depression is the most common complication of childbirth in our country. 1 in 8 women will have some degree of postpartum depression. And so, what you're seeing these days is that obstetricians and pediatricians are trying to educate moms about the signs of depression and dads too.
Mhm.
If moms are already tired and sleepy and fatigued, but some moms just can't take care of their baby. They feel like they have no energy. They feel like there's something wrong with them, or they feel like they don't want to take care of their baby. They're not sleeping, they're not eating, they're not moving around much. They may want to keep the home dark, and they're not enjoying their baby, clearly. For women that have any of these symptoms, they do need to talk to somebody. They do need to get help. Postpartum depression is very common. It's totally treatable with antidepressants and psychotherapy. 95% of the cases of postpartum depression recover. And so I'm glad that moms are becoming more aware of the symptoms of postpartum depression. I don't think we're there with dads yet. I want dads to understand that if they see their wife not acting right, if she doesn't want to pick up and hold the baby, if she's not wanting to nurse or bottle feed the baby, if she says, I can't take care of my baby, and God forbid she says, I'm thinking about hurting my baby, that's a huge red flag. Then dad needs to make sure that mom gets the help that she needs.
That is such a great point. And, I mean, maybe it's not even dad, it's other members of the family
Right.
too, grandparents, aunts, uncles. And I think too, just to underscore, this is 1 out of 8 women. So if you are feeling this way, don't feel like you're abnormal. This is treatable. The rate is much higher than I even knew was possible. So I think that's
Mhm.
great to know that there are resources, there's methods of treatment, and you don't have to be afraid or feel like
Right.
you're guilty. Can you talk about vulnerable child syndrome? What is that?
Well, vulnerable child syndrome is a condition that we see in babies who might have had a long stay in the NICU, in the neonatal intensive care unit. A tiny, tiny preemie who might have been in the hospital for 5 or 6 months. A baby with a birth defect who might have had 2 or 3 surgeries to correct it. When the child grows enough and recovers enough to go home, sometimes the parents, predominantly the mom, treat them as if they're still sick.
Hmm.
It's kind of like an impression that your special needs baby continues to be a special needs child. And even when the babies turn into normal children, the mother or father may treat them as if there's something wrong with them. They're more careful with them. And that discourages normal child development. That notion that there's something wrong with your child, that your child is sickly or weak, gets transferred, excuse me, or conveyed to the child instead of, go for it. You're a good kid. You're normal. Go for it. Let's learn how to crawl. I love it when you try to feed yourself. All the things that normal kids do. If you're hovering and saying, "Oh, be careful. Oh, be careful. You can't do that." That gives the child a sense that there's something wrong with them.
Mm.
And that's essentially what vulnerable child syndrome is. It's not very common, thank goodness. We talk a lot to NICU parents about outcomes for their baby. And thank goodness, most premature babies survive and thrive and become perfectly normal children.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your time in the NICU and the physicians and the healthcare providers, because sometimes they don't necessarily agree on treatment, and you've probably seen lots of cases. Can we dig into that a little bit?
Well, working in a NICU is a busy place. It's a critical care unit. It's an ICU for babies.
Mhm.
And so there are physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, pharmacists, all kinds of people. And in big NICUs and in academic centers, there will also be social workers, nurse managers, chaplains, for example. So you have this big team of people, and the physician is generally the captain of the team. But people have opinions about what should be done. If a parent has done something wrong, like a mother who's addicted to opiates or heroin, people carry their prejudices against that into the NICU inadvertently. If you have a baby that has significant brain damage, people can have prejudices against and bias for or against raising a child who is profoundly affected by their brain injury. And so conflict arises in the NICU very rarely, but when it does, it is generally over the perception of how the child's outcome will be. What surgery, what therapy is indicated, and whether or not everyone agrees that therapy is the right thing to do. In the worst situations, some doctors may think that a therapy is futile and the parents disagree. Or the parents may think that something is futile and the doctor disagrees. And so, what we do these days is take that whole team together and sit with the family and discuss the issues that are important and the issues that have arisen as a result of the conflict. And those kinds of issues always get worked out. The parents always have the last say. The doctors can give advice and counsel to the families, but the parents in general have choices about their child's treatment. And it's only when treatments are truly futile, when a baby is really terminal, that parents are put in an unusual situation of being hastened to deal with their child's death. That's a very rare situation, but it does come up sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. And that is so incredibly unfortunate. My heart breaks. And I just have to imagine the ethical dilemmas that are associated with all of this too.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of
There was an interesting case I talk about in the book. It was a baby born with a cloacal exstrophy, where the bladder and the bowel and the uterus all empty into a pouch outside an opening outside the abdomen. And the kidneys were abnormal, and they created a connection for the baby to urinate. They created a connection for the baby to have stools, but there was no way for the baby to be a recipient of a kidney transplant. So we started the baby on kidney dialysis, peritoneal dialysis through the abdomen, which went very poorly. We tried and tried. She survived a year in the hospital on peritoneal dialysis. She went home and survived another year. And then her family finally decided that it was okay to stop the peritoneal dialysis. So that baby actually had a therapy that kept her comfortable, prevented her from suffering, but did not really give her a normal life.
Yeah, that's got to be just so tough.
And a lot of the caregivers had trouble with that particular case because there were so many issues about futility and comfort. So there are cases like that. They're really very few and far between.
Yeah. So now the name of your book is So Many Babies. I got to ask, how many babies in your 35-year career have you seen or treated?
Oh, probably thousands. But it's a great career. You get to attend high risk deliveries,
Mhm.
twins, triplets. I've attended deliveries of quads and quints before. Um, and that is such an amazing, special thing to be at the delivery of a high risk baby, to help the parents adjust to having a sick child. And then the baby gets admitted to the NICU. And then getting to know the family during the process of having a baby in the NICU. Moms are always in shock. They're always overwhelmed at first, dad too. And then they sort of settle in and learn how to go with the flow, how to visit, how to touch, how to talk to their baby. Many moms feel guilty and they don't want to admit that. There's usually nothing that they did to cause the early delivery or the
Mhm.
birth defect, but you have to recognize that they're going through this extremely difficult time. And I loved working with the parents and helping the moms recognize their own strength. NICU
Mm.
parents are amazingly courageous and strong. And I tell stories about a lot of those parents in my book because I thought they really did teach me a lot about courage and bravery and perseverance and resilience, really. I mean, one of my favorite moms was a PhD psychologist whose little baby was in the hospital for 6 months.
Hmm.
I learned so much from that mom. That child just recently graduated from the University of Texas at Austin and is perfectly normal. There were so many moments where we thought she was not going to survive, and she did. And she's a normal young adult now. So wonderful cases like that. I just loved being able to do what I did. And I think once I retired and started writing about these cases and remembering the special parents, I came to fully believe how what a gift my career had been, how much of a difference I had made, and I felt even more fulfillment for the career that I had had.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And hearing those stories, that's just so uplifting and heartwarming. And so I have to ask you too, as an author, as a writer, as somebody who wrote these stories and put them all together, what have you learned as a writer in writing and releasing your book?
Hmm. I had a little trouble contacting all the families to get permission,
I
but
can
I
imagine.
managed to do that. It took off and on almost a year. Um, I learned about the necessity of detail in writing. I had a wonderful editor. I actually had two editors, and seems like the first editor, some days she was like dragging it out of me. She said, "Describe this for me." And so she taught me the importance of trying to paint a picture in words so that the reader could imagine what it's like being in the NICU. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to write with enough detail and tell stories that had enough nuance that
Mhm.
people could imagine what it might be like. Only 10% of births go to the neonatal intensive care unit. So 90% of people who have a baby will have a perfectly normal baby. And that's the good news. A
Yeah.
minority of people will need to have a baby in the NICU. But I
Yeah.
wanted to tell the story of that minority. I wanted to tell about how hard we work to keep those babies alive, how hard the parents work to adjust to that situation.
Mhm.
That was my goal. And I think I did that. I hope I did that.
You absolutely did. It's a magnificent book. Can you tell people where they can go to find out more about you, give your website, your social media, and of course, where they can go to find the book?
Oh, thank you. My website is susanlandersmd.com. From there are links to all of my social media sites and links to buy the book from online booksellers, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Apple, whatever. I also have a blog there. Parents might find some interesting blog posts about general topics that parents want to know more about. I love posting on Instagram and Facebook about the issues that working mothers face today. I'm seeing working mothers struggle so much during this pandemic. And even though I told stories about my own working mother experience in the book, I really want to do more in supporting working mothers. And that's what I'm doing with my social media posts.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I encourage all mothers, all expectant mothers, and fathers too, anybody who is associated with motherhood and babies and children to follow Dr. Susan Landers on her social media. Find the book, get the book. It's available everywhere, as you just heard. It is Dr. Susan Landers, and her book is So Many Babies, My Life Balancing a Busy Medical Career and Motherhood. Dr. Landers, thank you for joining us on the Books That Make You show.
Oh, Desiree, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. You bet. And thank you, everybody, for listening today to the Books That Make You show on MyStar95.com. Please do me a favor and check out our website. It is booksthatmakeyou.com. And there you can also find links to our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook, as well as YouTube. You can ring the bell to subscribe. That way you never miss a Books That Make You show. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.